I am the founder and CEO of Right On Fundraising, and we provide fresh fundraising solutions for high impact nonprofits across the United States. What does that mean? Well, it means that we like to think of ourselves as a bridge between old school fundraising methodologies and new ways of doing things, community-centric ways of doing things. We represent a lot of different nonprofits, so we do a lot of different work around grant writing, individual giving programs, training and education like this today, and capital campaigns. So I really appreciate everybody being here today. I'm really excited about our topic because as I got into this and started doing research, whoa, I can't wait to share some of this with you, and I can't wait to get feedback from our panelists today as well. A little bit of housekeeping. Those of you who have been with us for a session before know Kara. She's got her camera off right now. Kara Thornton is always working behind the scenes, keeping us in line, doing the recording, troubleshooting. If you have any questions in today's session, you are welcome to either chat it. Kara's going to see that, and then she's going to jump in because I am terrible at watching like the chat go by. But Kara's going to jump in and let me know what folks are talking about. And if you have a question for the panel, or if we want to stop and discuss something, or even go down a rabbit hole, whatever we want to talk about, right? So Kara, wave, say hello so everybody sees you. Kara is our marketing manager. And if you have any troubleshooting issues this morning, like we know that Randy's system has a gremlin, for example, Kara can help with not gremlins, but most other problems as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and introduce our guests today. I am very, very excited. We have with us Randi Williams. So Randi is a Texas transplant who currently lives in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. She has her bachelor's degree in nonprofit leadership and is currently working on her master's in social justice. Before moving into nonprofit consulting with Right On Fundraising in 2022, Randi actually spent 15 years in the nonprofit sector in various fields, including public television, the arts, animal welfare, and education. The majority of that time, she was leading development and fundraising efforts. Outside of her career, Randi enjoys spending time with her family, her husband and her 2 young sons, reading, finding new and brief hobbies to satisfy her ADHD, and participating in anti-racism activities. Randi, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. I'm super excited.
We also have Srivdya, and I'm going to take a beat. So Srivdya Venkatasubramanya. Oh, I got it. It's so pretty. I love it. Venkatasubramanya. So Srivdya is the founding member and the executive director of the Rave Cultural Foundation. Her exposure to Indian music and dance in her formative years really helped shape a lifelong love and appreciation for the performing arts. For several years, she organized an annual event called Sargam. Did I pronounce that correctly? Okay, to bring Indian classical performance to Northwest Arkansas. As a tribute to her parents and in honor of a legacy of service, Srivdya named the Rave Foundation an amalgamation of their first names, Raji and Venkat. Srivdya's background as an educator prompted her to start Rave Cultural Foundation to help and support the next generation's efforts to learn Indian music and dance by increasing exposure and opportunity. Her academic background is in Spanish. She can speak and understand 5 different languages, which is amazing. Wow. And she does a lot of teaching and curriculum design as well. So Srivdya, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I'm very excited to be here today.
Woohoo! Okay. So today we're primarily going to focus on how donor motivation has changed post-pandemic. And I'm using my air quotes for those of us who think that who the heck knows when we're actually going to be post-pandemic, right? So before we dive into it, because that is a huge topic to unpack, we're actually going to start with a little bit of an overview because I want everybody to come into this conversation with the same context, same language, and same understanding of what we're talking about. So let's start by talking about some shared language around donor motivation. This is actually something that Right On Fundraising has done presentations on before. It's called The 7 Faces of Philanthropy. It was written by Prince and File. And this has kind of become industry standard as far as donor motivation is concerned. And there are 7 here. Get it? 7 faces of philanthropy. Captain Obvious moment there. Anyway, communitarian is number 1. Communitarians are those who do good because it makes sense to them to do good. There's the devout who believe that doing good is God's will. There are investors who believe that doing good is good business. There are socialites who believe that doing good is just plain fun. There are the altruists who believe that doing good feels right. There are repayers who do good in return. And there are dynasts, where doing good is a family tradition. So 7 different faces of philanthropy, 7 different motivations. And of course, there's crossover between all of these, right? Some folks are communitarians and repayers and different things like this. But in general, this is kind of how we segment historically the motivations of donors. What does it break down to? So communitarians represent the largest segment traditionally of sorry, I'm looking at multiple things here on my screen, trying not to, my ADHD, Randy, trying not to get distracted. 26% of communitarians, or excuse me, 20% of all donors are communitarians. 21% are the devout. That really aligns nicely with the fact that religion is still the number 1 cause that folks give to. 15% are investors. You've got socialites at 11%, altruists at 9%, repayers at 10%, and dynasts at 8%. So you can see that the folks who believe that doing good makes sense comprise the largest historic population of donor motivation, followed pretty closely by the devout. And then the next biggest group are the investors, which is actually kind of surprising to me. But there it is. Okay, I don't
think it should be ever surprising, Lindsay. The ones who don't have money are the ones who give.
There you go, right?
That's the truth.
Yep.
Because really, I mean, if you look at this, it's just that altruists and dynasts, who I'm assuming have a lot of money to give, form only 17% of the entire pie, which is so sad.
Right. That's actually a really interesting component. So I have some fun facts about all of these components, and you just hit the nail on the head. So a couple of things about these particular groups of people. So communitarians are 76% business owners, 90% male. Interesting.
Wow.
And because they believe that their fortune is intertwined with the community, their giving primarily stays local. The devout have a lot in common with altruists, actually. Like altruists, they really resist the idea that giving is transactional at all. They really cringe towards that idea. And they channel almost all of their giving, 96% of their giving, into religious charities. This group is also mostly male and primarily college educated. The investor, who again believes that doing good is good business, no surprise here, right? They're going to give with one eye on the cause and one eye on the tax implications. Tax avoidance is of particular importance to this group. I don't know if anybody here, I think it's called the power of zero, that has gained a lot of popularity, which is folks focusing on how you can get to a 0% tax bracket, things like that in your retirement investment. I like that laugh, Casey. Thank you. Casey's like, what? That's going to be
Good luck with that.
particular interest to investors. 71% of investors, this is really interesting, believe that nonprofits are better than the government at addressing societal issues, which is kind of interesting. The socialites, so the folks who like to give believe that doing good is fun. This is primarily women with college degrees, 62% women and 79% college degrees. And they are more drawn towards arts, education, and religion, because really it is the social opportunities and the networking component that they're very interested in. The altruist, doing good feels right. these folks tend to focus their philanthropy on social causes. So they are particularly interested, for example, at aging in place and supporting people who are experiencing homelessness, things like this. As you pointed out, Srivdya, which is super interesting, 90% college education, 70% business owner. And as with the name, they like to give anonymously, right? So yes, correct. These are folks with money. Repayers. Repairs are a really interesting constituency because they tend to be a constituent or a client of a nonprofit first, and then they become a donor. And because of that motivation, because of that very specific motivation, they tend to actually support fewer nonprofits than other groups. And the nonprofits that they tend to select all kind of fall within the same thematic area, right? And then this last one, just a couple interesting notes about the Dynast. Doing good as a family tradition. This is actually the most diverse group of donor motivation when it comes to gender. This is half men and half women. 45% of them inherited their wealth, and the rest of them, the other 55%, inherited some kind of family business or initiative, and that is where the wealth is coming from. So the 7 phases of philanthropy is interesting when you think about a donor's core motivation. But I have to tell you, good old Prince and File, they have written a lot of books. They are experts in a lot of areas. And this is, I went back and looked, because typically you can find updated versions of books throughout the years. This was based on a study completed in 1994. So a few things have changed.
Just a little.
Appropriate response. And oddly enough, our texts have not changed. There is not an updated study. Prince and File have not gone back to redo the study, and there's no one else that I can find that has come in to redo the gap. So our information about donor motivation is actually pretty out of date when it comes from an academic standpoint. So I wanted to try and find a couple of additional pieces of information that could maybe bring our shared language, like maybe into this century, would be a good place to start. So I went into the Stanford Social Innovation Review, and Srivdya, Randi, I can't wait to get your thoughts on this. There are a couple things that the review believes have changed. So this comes. I'm gonna grab a sheet of paper here because I want to make sure I get their credentials correctly. So what we're about to talk about comes from Dr. Sarah Conrath, who's an associate professor of philanthropic studies, and Virginia Clark, who's an assistant secretary emeritus for the advancement at the Smithsonian Institute of Counsel for Martz and Lundy. So folks who know what they're talking about, right? They went through and did a study about specifically what has changed, and found some really, really interesting pieces. And I'd like to get your feedback on if you see this in your work at the nonprofit with the nonprofit clients, Randi. So number one is trust. The ladies found that over time, trust has significantly declined in Americans across all ages, all demographics. And younger generations have lower amounts of trust compared to older generations. Their survey showed that 1 in 5 young adults, they're primarily looking at Gen Y. By the way, Gen Y is anybody born 1997 or after, if anybody else wants to feel like really aged this morning. So 1 in 5 young adults believe that most people, not just nonprofits, but that most people are untrustworthy. And trust in nonprofits hit a peak in 2010, but by 2019, only 52% of Americans said that they actually trusted nonprofits. Is trust something that you see as a trend that has changed in donor motivation?
I would say yes, just because if you look at media today and I mean, who can you trust, right? You can't trust your politicians. You can't trust the big corporate businesses. How do you know that those dollars are going to go to what they need to? You know, you look at the church and you look at things like that, and you see all this corruption. And it's hard to believe possibly that your money is going to go to actually supporting the people that it's supposed to serve.
I think that's a very I mean, corruption definitely is, I want to say, I don't think there's more corruption now than before, but I think thanks to social media, thanks to the internet, you get to know more about it and more easily, which was not there before. And I also think that, I think the other aspect also is nowadays people think they know better. So it's not just about trusting an expert or, you know, someone who's been doing something for, you know, a long period of time, understands, you know, and does a good job, you know, is not just doing something random. But so I think there's also that piece, you know, that, oh, you know, oh, I can do that, you know.
Absolutely. So
And I could
everyone's a subject matter expert now.
I think that, because that, especially from, you know, what I've been learning, is a very special outcome of social media, of the social media experience, because I think more and more people, you know, are learning through TikTok and in 1-minute videos about how to cook and how to clean and how to do this and that and everything. I think everybody just feels as if they know it all.
Right.
So
Yeah.
along with corruption, I think it's just this attitude that, you know, I know better, so, you know, I'm not going to give you my money because I could do a better job.
That's interesting.
I can show you a great example of that in terms of like animal welfare, like specifically like in Tulsa, for instance. So many volunteers would start at an animal welfare organization, and they're, you know, you run the gambit when it comes to animal welfare of who thinks, you know, no one, like no animal should ever be euthanized, or like protection to, you know, the neighborhoods and community and so forth. So you'd have these volunteers who weren't happy with the way like animals were being treated, and they're like, well, I'll just start my own. There are so many animal welfare organizations that have all sprouted from like working within one or two of the main ones, because they think that they know better and that they know where to invest the funds.
That's a great example. That in particular is one area I'm always surprised at how many animal welfare agencies there are, fighting for a very small piece of the pie. That's, you know, a very hard area to fundraise for. One of the other things that this study jumped into that I really was surprised by, this one really took me back. I actually went and pulled another source because I was so surprised. But these ladies found that altruism was down in younger generations. So concern or compassion for those who are less fortunate is that what we typically just define as altruism. They found that generational declines in American college students' self-reported empathy. So high school seniors and first-year college students in 2019 reported declining agreement with the statements, "I get very upset when I see other people treated unfairly. And it's important to correct racial and economic inequities," in 2009 compared to 1966 when they first did this study. So when you're comparing 1966 to that generation of kiddos, students also agreed more with the statement, "It's not really my problem if others are in trouble or in need of help." Whoa, that is, I know we don't know a lot about.
That sounds like my 15-year-old son.
It does? It does. Well, okay, so let's talk about that, because my oldest kiddo is 9 and I was really surprised by that statement. What are your thoughts around it?
No, I think that attitude, that, oh, it's not my problem, right? I mean, I'm here. I think it just speaks of privilege. I think my mom, you know, I remember her always saying that the 60s were the best. You know, she would say, like, in anything, you name it, you know, dance, music, whatever it was, like the 60s was the best. Like, you can't beat us, is what she'd always say. And it's just drive me mad. But I think there's something to do with, people that came out of the two world wars. I think there was so much loss, and one remembers loss very recently. And I think the 50s, 60s, the people who came out of those generations were, I think, very aware of, the loss. And I think my children, for example, they don't understand loss.
That's
They really don't. They don't understand hardship. Like, they've never had to work hard for, like, even if I switched off the TV, my son had something else to do.
Yeah.
He would keep himself occupied with something else. So it's a first world problem, to switch off the TV. But you get what I'm trying to say,
right?
There isn't that. They don't understand what it means to struggle,
right?
To really not have something. We grew up, when I grew up, 80s, 90s is when I grew up, and my parents, I mean, we would have literally just 2 pairs of shoes. That's it for the entire year, and we'd get a replacement the day, literally, because the cobbler would have stitched it a couple of times before it was tossed and a new one was bought, right? I mean, that's how we grew up. Even though,
yes.
I mean, could my parents have bought me like 5 pairs of shoes? Yes, they could have, but that was never a priority, and we were never taught. We were never allowed that.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't care. Like, we never asked. Like, we never even asked, oh, can I have these shoes? And today I hear about Converse. Is that what it's called? Converse.
The best shoes ever. Yes.
It's like white shoes, which kids don't even want to wear after they buy it because it's white and they don't want it to get dirty. And I'm like, then why did you buy it?
Right.
So there is consumerism, and I think it's just a very different world today.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because most of the studies also mention folks coming out of World War II and how different those generations, and if you think about it, and you're thinking about where the majority of individual giving is coming from right now, it's obviously not coming from Generation Y. It's still not mostly coming from millennials, even Gen X. It's still primarily coming from boomer, from silent generations. Those folks are still representing a lot of donor motivation. So I think that this particular study is focusing a lot on the younger generation. 2 things. I did go ahead and pull, because I was so surprised, I went ahead and pulled another study that I found, and it is from, it's a combined study from NIH and the National Library of Medicine. And they were actually doing a study about altruism, specifically about altruism and blood donations. And some of the things that they found were really interesting, specifically around Gen Y. They did not find that there was maybe a lack. One of the things they mentioned that was really interesting is that Gen Y, or younger generations, are, to some degree, they act opportunistically, but not in contradiction to altruism, which is a really interesting way to think about that. So they act opportunistically, perhaps younger donors, but not in contradiction to altruism. And one of the things they found, and specifically around blood donation, is that younger generations have a higher volunteerism rate than other generations, and higher volunteerism rates actually positively correlate to altruism. So it's hard to say, right? Like, is it altruism that has changed, or do we just define opportunity different? And do we define altruism different than we had looked at it in generations past?
Well, you also have to consider that the younger donors do not have the money of our family, our parents, right? Like, we don't have the investment to put into it. So many of my friends that are in their early 30s are still renting. They don't even own homes, versus like my family, who, when I was like 26, they were like, why don't you have a house yet? And I was like, well, times are different. So I can give my time, I can give that. But I can't necessarily write a $1,000 check like my family can.
And we need to take it a little easy on Gen Y. Let's remember they were born in 1997. The oldest of them just turned 26. Let's all think about where we were when we were 26 and maybe not start analyzing their giving trends just yet.
And no, it's also, giving, I think, is such a complicated thing. It really depends. Like you just said, money, if we were to look only at money as giving, then that's a very different ball game. Because, for example, in the Indian community, for example, and this is very, I would like to generalize and say that this would be true across the world, wherever there are Indian communities. Mm-hmm. Indian communities will come together, make food, and give it away for free, like to their full capacity. Like if a lady, or even husband, wife, whatever, if they could cook for 100 people, they would cook for 100 people, and they'd be so happy to just come and share it with the entire community. Like they'd say, today's Diwali, I'm just giving away food, please come and share. And they'd be so proud and happy about everyone coming and enjoying their Indian food. But you go and ask the same people, hey, would you like to donate like $50? And they'd go like, let me think about it. So
yeah.
So it's like, what, and it's just like love, each one of us has our own perception of what love looks like and feels like, but it's the same way, you're giving whatever you're giving, we have to be open to accept all expressions of giving,
Right. So it sounds maybe like the definition of altruism is more what has changed than the level of altruism itself generationally, which is interesting thing to consider with these donors. So a couple of other things here I'm going to go through relatively quickly. Social benefits. So that means being part of a social network. And obviously we saw huge shifts to this during the pandemic, right? Where we had robust committees and special events and all these things beforehand. The pandemic shut a lot of that down. And so people lost a lot of the social benefit that came along with supporting organizations. Tax benefits, there have been major changes to the tax code that have implementations on people's giving. Egotism is one that I thought was really interesting. So around egotism, they say that this is, enhancing your reputation, experiencing good feelings about yourself for being involved in philanthropy. The research illustrates generational increases in younger donors' self-reported narcissism. With college students in the year 2000 having higher levels of narcissism than college students in the 1980s. So what do you think it looks like in 2020?
Where all we could do is post on social media that, oh, I just did X, Y, and Z for X, Y, and Z.
Like selfies weren't even a thing yet, I don't think, in the year 2000. So interesting. Also financial constraints. We've seen a lot of that. I mean, from this study. So more context. We started off with this original list of 7. Things have changed since 1994, right? We have some things that have been impacted. So what does giving look like today? And then I promise we're actually going to take some deep dives into some stuff that I know you guys wanted to talk about today. So this is pulled from Giving USA. For those of you not familiar with Giving USA, they do an incredible job. They kind of provide like the annual report for the nonprofit sector every year. And if you look specifically at this giving by individuals, giving today is still largely driven by individuals, 67%. Now, that has continued to go down every single year. We see greater levels of giving from fewer people. That's a whole other conversation about a historic change in wealth in our country and where wealth is going to. But right now, largely, most giving is still happening by individuals. So when we're thinking about what is most significant to our fundraising plan, giving by foundations represents about 20% of all giving, by bequests, 9%, corporations, 4%. One of the things that I find really interesting about this particular data is that you'll see here, so it's kind of small, underneath increase says increase 4.9% over 2020, increase 3.4% over 2020, decrease, increase. If the top three here, well, actually, I'm just going to focus in on individuals. Okay, great. Increase of 4.9%. That does not cover the spread on inflation. So when you start to account for inflation, we actually saw decreases in every single area of giving, except, strangely enough, for giving by corporations who benefited greatly from the market turnaround that happened during the pandemic, and who not only covered the spread on inflation, but who also covered the spread on the decrease in their giving from the year before. So corporations were kind of the swan song of 2021. But I want to set that expectation. Individuals still account for 67% of giving. That's a huge chunk. That's where we're going to focus a lot of our time today. But it's important to note that that demographic continues to get smaller as far as giving is concerned. And we actually did see a decrease in their giving from 2020. Okay, what are they giving to? So this piece was really interesting as well. I think I mentioned earlier that religion historically has represented the largest chunk of all giving, and that was up 5.4%. It represents 27% there. It goes down up until this point. It has gone down almost 1% every year for a very long time. So religious giving continues to become a smaller and smaller area. And then some other big wins. Public society benefit up 23.5% from 2020. That's a lot. I mean, my gosh, it did really well in 2020 anyway, because of all of the direct services that we were funding. It went up another. And then look at that arts, culture, and humanities comeback in 2021. Don't call it a comeback, right? 27, my gosh, that's amazing. 27.5%. So some changes so I guess what we're seeing here is we're seeing some market correction, right? In some donors wanting to get back to how they were giving before the pandemic, maybe making up for some gifts that they didn't give. Okay, awesome. What does public society benefit represent or mean in the comments? Look at that, Kara. I actually caught one. Woohoo!
You did. I was wondering if you're going to see it.
Great question. So there's two here that are easily confused, and that is human services and public society benefit. Human service might be something like a food bank or providing shelter for the homeless, whereas a public society benefit, that's going to be more social justice causes, funding to specifically uplift women and girls causes, things like that. Does that make sense? Human services is really more of those immediate, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs type things, whereas public society benefit is more about what I think of as more abstract societal challenges.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Another one, Casey asks, why in the world do they group animals with the environment? Great question. I don't know. They've done it for a long, long time. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so
it's just, I suppose, just trying to keep that as nature and non-human than anything else. That's all. I don't think there's any
that's
other
a great
reason.
guess.
Yeah, because we like to focus on ourselves, just going back to the narcissistic human beings.
So at this point, we have exciting. We all have the same language now, right? So we know what the original 7 were. We know what changed. We know what giving looks like today. So let's talk about our topic for today, donor motivation. And I want to start with special events. And to kick that off, Srivdya, I'd like to start with you. If you could please give us just kind of a general overview of what you saw in 2022. Rave Cultural Foundation produces a number of events. What are some of the major trends and challenges that you saw in 2022? And what do you think they mean for donor motivation?
Oh, I think, so we started in 2018, our organization. So I want to mention that because we had just barely, gotten our act together and the pandemic hit us. So we had to go from, the purpose of our organization is to bring people together in person, because arts is to be enjoyed and experienced in person. It's not meant for an online version. That just comes as a very poor second, if you can't go in person. But the whole idea of storytelling, of people getting together, of coming around the campfire, and eating and talking and singing together, right? This is just something very communal, something that's just part of being human. So having done that, we went everything online for a couple of years. And then last year was our first round of bringing everything back in person. And I myself, I'm also a small business owner. I also run a franchise. And what we were hearing from the donors and just from our own experience was that it was very important to start getting people to come back together, like to start meeting, because our entire economy, like everything we do pretty much is dependent on what we do together in person. So children learn best when they are in person with other children and their teachers and so on and so forth. It's just at every level. And we are still kids. We still need to meet up with each other for the emotional support, for the
fellowship, the community.
The physical support also, like just of everybody taking a piece of a job and getting it done and so on and so forth. So I think we were aligned in that sense, the organization and the donors, about wanting to get people back. And it was very hard to do that because especially we are an arts organization and we all know that arts comes right at the bottom of all hierarchies.
We just saw that on the list.
So we came up, actually, we started a brand new event last year called Chai Time. It was called NWA Chai Time. And the idea of Chai Time was, that's it, just come for a cup of tea and, some Indian style biscuits, because what we call biscuits is very different from what Americans call biscuits. We're a little more British in that sense. So that's it, it was just that, just an hour. And we thought we would have, it's always hard when a group of people meet and then you're like, okay, what shall we talk about? So we would have every month, we would have this, and we would invite people from the community, who already owned a business or ran something or was able to offer any kind of information or advice or support in any particular topic. And we would have them come and share and discuss. And we were like, yeah, come, if you've never tried biking, like we had one session on biking, I'll never forget. And this guy, like amazing, he brought his bike, he wore everything that he would wear, to do. And for me, I had to see that to really understand, because I don't like bikes, it's very uncomfortable. so
Agreed.
But
very little seats.
Yeah, but it was a great hit, everybody really enjoyed it. And we still struggle to get enough people to come in person,
that was my next question for you, because so it sounds like you said that there was definitely alignment between your audience and between the organization to want to get people back. So then you offered a super cool new idea, very creative. I love that. I love Chai Time. Did they come? Was this a, if you build it, they will come type of thing, or did you still see a decrease in attendance?
They definitely, there was a decrease in attendance. I mean, there's just no two ways about that. I mean, Did they all just come back in droves? No. But did they start coming back? Yes, definitely. Like some Chai Times, we ran out of chairs. Some chai times it was just 5 of us or 6 of us,
Right.
it kind of just depended on the weekend and things like that. But I think it did help bring people out, and that's all you can do. You can just keep, and I think getting the word out about things like this also has become more complicated. I mean, everything is a lot more complicated. And if we talk about ease of access, we talk more and more about accessibility. And frankly, going back again to what we were discussing earlier about, the animal shelters, right? I mean, there are more of them because everybody just, is like, oh, I can do this better myself, right? So there's just more and more fragments, fragmentation of the same service and product. So instead of seeing mergers, which is what typically you saw in the 90s, 2000s, more and more people, the companies and groups were actually merging. But now we are seeing again a fragmentation, because everyone believes that, oh, I can get a pie of, cut off the pie, a slice off. So it's just that. And I think it will come a full circle where again, people will start, realizing, oh, I'm really not getting what I thought I would get from this. So let me just give it up or merge it back or whatever.
I would also, would you say that, I think, so pre-pandemic, I used to go to so many fundraisers. Like every weekend I was at a fundraiser and I felt burnout, but it felt like an obligation, right? And then after COVID, I didn't have to do that anymore during COVID. I could just send a check. And then once the fundraiser started again, I was just like, I can just keep sending a check. So, but honestly, as someone who's been in development for so long, I love people that just want to send a check, right? Because then that's not $17.50 for their plate of dry chicken and like mashed potatoes that I don't have to spend, and it can go more towards the mission and the vision versus a fundraising event. But I think that from what I can see statistically, yeah, that the participation in events is not what it used to be.
And even online, even the online version, it was not as if people, were, and this is again, like now you go online, there's Netflix, there's Showtime, there's this and there's that, and Disney Plus, and so everything has just become so much more fragmented, is the best word I can find. So trying for an organization, especially for a very small organization, marketing has not gotten cheaper, by the way.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
Marketing
Matter of fact, everything's gotten more expensive, right? Including marketing.
And the ROI on marketing has gotten worse. It's
because it's a more and more crowded field, to your point. So Barbara had a question about that, and I actually have a couple things I wanted to show to you. And I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the impact to revenue as well. So I'm going to pull this back up and we can chat deeper. So this is from Classy. Those of you who have worked with Classy before, Classy is an online platform that does events, and they do a lot of events. And they put out a 2022 report that had some really interesting pieces of information in it that I wanted to put in front of the panel today for you all to consider. So some of the things that they found is that 92% of both virtual and in-person event attendees were likely to donate in addition to any registration and participation cost. The reason this jumped out at me and I wanted to include it is one of the trends that I have heard from a lot of nonprofits that nonprofits are really taking pride in is, well, our event is easy. You just pay for your ticket and we're not going to ask you for anything else when you get in the door. That is a trend that I've seen more and more of, that organizations are focusing on sponsorships and getting the majority of their fundraising done in sponsorships and also in ticket sales, and less so at the event itself. And yet the data that we're seeing from Classy indicates that the real opportunity still lies within the event. You can see, 40%, regardless of if they're attending virtually or in person, will give more than $100. And then this is also interesting. 91% of fundraising attendees are likely to take further action after a positive experience. So put a pen in that one. Think about that one. Another piece I wanted to get in front of you was how people are attending. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so this is from 2020 to 2022. 1,000 different respondents attending all kinds of different fundraising events. 26% of them went in person because the event was in person. 21% of them went from home because the event was totally virtual. Those are Randy's people.
Those are mine.
20% attended, but the event had a virtual component. And look at these last two. 19% of the event going population stayed home. They just stayed home. They didn't attend virtually. They didn't attend in person because they stopped going, period, in 2020. And then an additional 15% attended from home, even though the event had an in-person component. So if you're looking at this, if you're analyzing this, what my big takeaway is here, 35% of the folks who would typically be attending events are not back yet. Whoa.
And this is very specifically about fundraising events, which means you are looking at a very committed group,
right?
An established group, people who are already interested in what you're doing.
Right.
So if you open that up, if you zoom out to organizations that are trying to get people to just come to their events, forget a fundraising event, just to come to an event. Oh, it's worse. So yeah.
Wow.
It's okay, but we're all in it together. We were in it. We're in it together. That's it. And I think every time, each one of us, every organization, every individual, we encourage each other. And this is a situation where you can't even tell, health is a private thing. It's a personal choice about how much you choose to expose yourself to whatever, and so you really can't force people to just come out.
Right.
But I think for mental health purposes, and that's how I always put it, that it's a mental health issue. You cannot, just staying at home is also not good, and it doesn't mean you have to go to like 30 fundraisers in one weekend, right?
To take the pressure off Randy, who is clearly putting it all over herself.
I'm just writing checks over here, guys.
I hear you, Randy. I hear you.
Well,
I think these statistics are interesting because you look at 55% of them do not go through those doors.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what your field is, you might need them to go into those doors so that they can see the impact. There's some nonprofits that you have to visually see in order to really grasp it. So there's no, this has to hurt fundraisers or nonprofits in general, because 55% of the people aren't even getting in front of your face where you can build those relationships and meet people and network.
And, it makes sense now when you think, so when I saw that Classy was saying, whatever those numbers were, they were huge, 94% of people giving at the event. First, when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, yeah, but people, what we hear is that there's donor fatigue and who wants to do another wine poll. But when you think about the fact that 55% of your audience is not going to show up, then it really makes the fundraising that you do in the room that much more important, whether people are tired of it or not, right? Like some organizations are not going to hit that sponsorship goal. They're not going to hit that ticket sales goal because they don't have the number of people, right? The audience is not the same number of people that it has been in the past. So to get to those fundraising numbers, you have to do other things. Let's look at a couple more things in the special event area that I thought were really interesting. So here they're asking attendees how likely they are to give during events. I thought this was really interesting because there has been the argument made that, well, we don't want to do virtual because those people don't give as much. The giving is very similar, regardless of whether folks are attending virtually or if they're attending in person. And in some ways, in some categories, look at that over 100, it's more. It doesn't surprise me that gifts over $10,000 are going to be made in person, right? Like a major gift and above, that definitely seems like that's an in-person gift, but there's a lot of giving in the middle that's happening with virtual attendees. Srivdya, is this something that you have seen with some of your donors?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that?
Yeah. Is this something that have you been receiving donations at these levels from virtual attendees?
Yeah. So yes, I think it's a little hard to answer that question simply because, like I said, we had just started when all this muddied the waters.
Yes.
So yes, we kept growing. Definitely, we kept growing in donations, and in what we have something called a membership, where you can donate at a certain level and things like that. So yes, we did see every year, whether it was online, whether it was in person, combination, whatever it was, we did see more and more people want to give and to give more. Like there were people who were going to the next level of giving, So I think definitely, I think human, again, I think it just keeps going back to human nature. I think we are, like I said, the more you don't have, actually, the more you do share, the more you do want to give, because you understand what it means not to have something. So I think that very human response that we have to each other, to that empathy that we have, I think that is very much there. I don't think that's gone away. But how we are expressing it definitely has changed. And that's why I think when it goes back to metrics, about what are you counting, right? Or what are you looking at? I think that also has to change because you can, in the arts especially, and I do my organization is a very niche organization because we are promoting Indian arts in Northwest Arkansas. So not
about
exactly
as niche as you can get.
Yeah, not exactly the place, you'd expect like thousands of people to come and attend an Indian music concert, right?
Yes.
And it also further complicates things because when I say Indian music, the first question I get asked is, oh, is this Native American? And I'm like, no, this is Indian from India, So it's what I'm trying to say is there's trouble. I mean, it's not easy to promote this. And so as it is, you're looking at pretty low numbers. And then when you add all these layers, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful 20 people showed up.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And you got to make the most of those 20 people while they're in the room. That's what we're getting from this.
So I think any organization trying to think about, are people going to give me money or not? Like, that fear, right? I mean, am I going to get funded? I'm doing all this work and am I going to get funded? I think the only answer I have is, one, are you doing whatever you're doing? Is it coming from your heart? And is it addressing something important? It is important, right? It is important to have, arts and music and dance and, diversity and things like that. So make sure that you are giving something that goes deeper than just a show or an event or, that you're just handing out food, right? There has to be that deeper reason why you're doing this. And as long as that is there and and your enthusiasm is infectious, I promise. So don't worry, it will come. But yes, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of meeting people and doing the outreach and not giving up. Yeah.
So I just went forward to the next page because you are reading my mind. So the next things are about the top drivers of excellent attendee experience. And remember, on that first slide, it was, I think, 91% of folks who said they had an excellent attendee experience would make a second gift to the organization outside of an event. And that's the moneymaker, right? It's great to make money inside of an event, but really the purpose of an event is to engage donors outside of the event and build up your donor pipeline that way. So number one in-person attendees, which you just hit the nail on the head, was thoughtful and relevant content, more so than anything else. Some of the other things I think are really interesting on the in-person side. So look at number 2 and number 3, easy event check-in and simple event registration. So the first thing is the actual content, the program. And the second thing is all about tech. Second and third are all about how easy is it for me to get in and out of this event, right? Which is great.
We still do cash and tickets. We still do that also.
Yeah. So, and then the virtual attendees, the top drivers of excellence for them is also really interesting. So they want an event that's enjoyable and simple to navigate. That tells me they're navigating on their phone, right? So we're back to tech, or on their laptop. Again, easy registration. They list thoughtful and relevant content as number 3, which makes sense because they're not there in person. It's a little bit different when you're experiencing something virtually. 4, access to content on mobile. So 3 of the 4 are tech. And then number 5, engagement through polls, breakout rooms, networking with attendees. One of the things that we've consistently heard from people who like to attend virtually is they don't want to be forgotten about. They don't want to be treated like they're not really there, or they're stuck at a corner just because they're not in person. Everything on the virtual attendees list. And let's see, 3 things on the in-person attendee list, because I'm going to count clear pre-event communication as tech as well. Almost all of this is tech related. So the number, I don't know, I'm going to push that back to the panel. Do you feel, to me, this is totally pandemic driven, right? This is not, I do not think if we had looked at this list 5 years ago that these would have been the top 5 things that in-person event attendees cared about. What do you all think?
Do you want to go first, Randy?
No, actually, I'm going to allow you because that's a big question. You're the fundraising panelist.
So, oh gosh, I hate Amazon.
This is a
And the
sidebar
reason
to
I
the
say
rabbit
that,
hole.
I hate Google and Amazon because the reason is because it is so easy to go and buy something on Amazon. And Amazon has only grown bigger and bigger and bigger. And if anything, all competitors, and my husband works for Walmart. I mean, I live in Bentonville, Arkansas, the world headquarters
Right.
for Walmart. And Walmart has had to compete with Amazon to provide the same service, which is, you just go to the website, you search for what you want, and you just click and buy. So you're not even filling out address, nothing. You're just clicking and one click buy, right? I think all of you have heard about that. Anybody here who's not heard of one click buy? I'm sorry, I can't see all the screens, but
If
anyone here has still not heard of one click buy, you've heard it today.
Yes.
So with, so even though I am a small, nonprofit and I pay $1,200 a year to use a CRM, which helps me keep track of everyone who's buying or doing anything, with me, I have to compete with that.
Right. That consumer.
And there is no way I can compete with that because no one's going to pay me a couple of $1 million because that's what it costs to get a one-click buy. I have been trying to get, because we've been trying to resolve this problem about having like a membership area. That is where, like if say you're a member and I say you can have like 2 free tickets or you get discounts or something, right? So an ability to log in and keep track of your history, right? Mm-hmm. Simple, easy. Everybody does it like 1 million times everywhere for free. Yeah, but it's not for free because those companies have invested millions, if not billions, in that technology.
Right.
But I don't have access to that technology. But the consumer has already been trained in that technology. So yeah, everyone wants it, on their app. I'm not surprised.
They want the buy it now.
I mean,
I've noticed
is there.
statistically, the more clicks someone has to do, the more likely they are to drop out.
Oh yeah, the 2-click rule is what everybody aims for, is that even in the nonprofit world, we want folks to be able to get to where they want to go within 2 clicks. And we even advise our clients at Right On, if it takes somebody more than 2 clicks to make a donation on your website, the likelihood that they're going to do it goes way down. So this is a significant barrier and change, is what we're saying in donor motivation, is that tech, regardless of if it's virtual or if it's in person, that tech has become such an elevated expectation of nonprofits.
Instant gratification, the problem with instant gratification is itself, right? Life is not about instant gratification. But we have created this beast called the internet, and the technology keeps supporting that. And we are only investing as a society more and more in this instant gratification. And the point, I don't think, is that we have to fight against it, but I think we have to push for more accessibility to that instant gratification in all areas. I mean, again, we're talking about equity, right? I mean, if you're talking about equity across the world, across everything, then we need to have these conversations, about what does that mean? Yeah, because you can't create a monster, unleash it on society, and then say, okay, now just deal with it, and just I will be the only one making the money out of it.
Well, you have to make that personal connection, and you can't do it through virtual attendee. And like, for instance, a lot of like natural disasters, and even during COVID at one point, like who was it? Like Red Cross, for instance, when there's like flooding, text to give $5, the 6-digit number, and you just text it and you're done, and you walk away and you're like, well, I gave to it. And it's that instant satisfaction that you supported helping these people, but $5 is it really going to do a lot? Like, are you going to be able to stay involved and see how these people are being affected by the flooding or a hurricane or what have you? No. So you want those long-term donors. You don't want
that's a really interesting component. And I've pushed us forward here into the top drivers of a poor attendee event experience, because we're going to see a lot of that on the backside, right? So virtual attendees, top 5 reasons why they would say they had a poor event experience. No surprise. Trouble registering online, bad tech, right? Unclear value of donations or participation in the organization's mission, which is exactly what you just said, Randy. So not only do nonprofits know, we know on our side that we're able to establish more authentic, deeper relationships with folks in person, but even the folks who want to attend virtually are getting it too. So we have to figure out new ways as nonprofits to create authentic relationships with donors virtually, because if they are going to continue to attend virtually and they don't feel connected to, and we don't feel like we're getting to them, then that is a very specific challenge that we as nonprofits need to address head on.
And
Number 3,
getting to them. No, I just wanted to point out that getting to them is also becoming so complicated, because I don't know if you know about this, but like marketing, like we've always talked about. I mean, this is actually research that came from, again, the Second World War, actually, about how many times do you need to see something before it goes into long-term memory, right? So a lot of this happened, all these research happened at that time. And it comes actually from language learning research. So this short-term memory, long-term memory, it used to be an average of 7 to 8. That was 6 to 8 was the average. You needed to see something that many times over, within a week, after 2 weeks, 1 month, 6 months, and then it became part of your long-term memory or whatever. Now they're doubling it almost.
Wow! So
because your attention span,
16. Wow.
Because the idea was, this research was based on the assumption that you paid attention to what you were looking at. And now that attention span has gone down. So that used to be in marketing, it used to be, I think, 3 seconds, because it's called the goldfish. I think it's called the goldfish something.
Yes. Goldfish paradigm or something like that.
Something, yeah. Because the goldfish, I believe, it maximum can stay still only for 3 seconds or something, and then it immediately changes direction, moves, whatever.
Ted Lasso, be a goldfish. Yes.
And now, so human for
That's
the
why
first
my
time,
husband calls me a goldfish.
No.
I'm a
Short-term
silverfish.
memory.
but but what I'm trying to say is, for the first time in human history, that has gone down. For the humans have gone below a goldfish.
That's so terrible. That's the worst
Because
takeaway
all
from
that
today's call.
because all that is coming from social media.
Right.
So you
Oh,
pause
wow.
not even for a second. You're not pausing even for a second. It's, you're just
Right. You're just scrolling. It's just a constant scroll.
so.
And on top of it, video length, right? Like you have to capture them like within 3 seconds, I think it is.
Less than
or
that.
they're
That's
just
what I'm
going to go
saying. It's
past
become
you.
less than 3 seconds.
Yeah, and it can't be too long and it can't be too short. There's so many rules in order to keep people engaged online.
So I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make everyone,
very sad. Very sad and depressed. No.
But actually, when I learn about these things, when I read these things and, learn more about how human behavior is changing in this aspect, I actually, it makes me even more, how to put it, like, I really want to go and fight that war.
Well, no, and I gotta say, it's not that this is sad and depressing. This is why we're here, which is to learn how motivation has changed. And spoiler alert, it's changed a lot, is what we're saying. Like things have changed a lot, not just from the pandemic, but they were already changing before that as well. So we have about 20 minutes left, and I actually wanted to cover one other topic today. So I'm going to move us forward just a little bit here. So quick recap, how has donor motivation changed at events? Well, some major takeaways for me are 35% of the market is staying home. That is pretty significant when you're trying to plan anything. More than a third of them prefer a virtual option. So virtual is not going anywhere. We're going to have to learn how to be experts at hybrid events. And there are all those challenges about how
which
to
is adding to your expense.
Which it will add to expense. And then the tech, registration check and mobile experience, which again, we've got to figure out how to cost effectively.
Which adds to your expense.
Compete to your point, Srivdya, we've got to be able to compete with other consumer experiences because that is what our donors are expecting from us. All right, we're going to move away.
Thank you so much. You know what? I'm just right now, my brain is going zing, 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 zing. And I'm like, oh, the next time I apply to a Walmart or, one of these big company grants or something, I'm going to put it in there. Will you donate your tech to us?
Absolutely.
Like, will you share, will you support us by allowing our system to get upgraded to a one-click buy?
Yeah. So we have a quick question from Casey, who is asking, how are virtual events more costly than in-person, no cater, no venue? So I will say, you're right there, Casey. Well, I think what we're talking about are hybrid events where you are having to produce the in-person and the donor expects that it will have a virtual component. To your point, if you axe the in-person and you only have the hybrid, then you can just shift around your budget, right? You can make a greater investment in tech because you're not having to invest in food and things like that. And for some organizations, that's going to be the answer, right? For other organizations, to Randy's point, that have more complicated or complex missions where you really need to be there in person to get swept up in that thoughtful content that donors want to see, that's where I think the biggest challenge is, because those folks are going to have to figure out how to do hybrid events for years to come, and to do them well, to compete. All right, we're going to move forward in talking about donor motivation and foundation giving, because this is another interesting area where we have seen some big shifts, specifically during the pandemic, but we had started to see it before that as well. So Randy, before we jump into yet some more research that we can unpack together, I want to give you just a minute to kind of discuss any major trends that you've seen in foundation giving, any pivots you're having to make. What are you seeing around foundation giving?
Yeah, so I think that the pandemic forced everyone to kind of examine and rethink how they give and also how they receive funding. And I think that that's specifically true when it comes to foundational institutional giving. One thing that really had to happen was there had to be a simplification, I would say, in the process of getting grant applications to the door. So a lot of foundations have had to rework the way that their grant applications and reporting processes happen, because during the pandemic, we learned that people needed money and they needed it quickly to serve their most urgent needs.
Absolutely.
And I would say really that that's something that has carried through past the pandemic by itself.
I agree. Well, so I'm going to jump into some things that I found really, really interesting. One of the things that has been surprising to me personally, and I candidly, I started fundraising straight out of college. So it has been 15-ish years now. So I don't have 50 years of experience or like longevity to look at this. I just have these 15 years, right, that I've been doing this.
Same.
I have really been surprised in how many foundations have changed their giving priorities or their guidelines. I can think of, so Right On Fundraising is based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. In the Tulsa market alone, I can think of 3 off the top of my head in the last 12 months that have changed their giving guidelines. And that has had a huge impact on the nonprofits that typically depend on those gifts. So one of the things that I wanted to know about was, is this a pandemic thing? I mean, we have seen a lot change, right? Throughout the pandemic, we've seen some changes become permanent when it comes to foundation giving. We have seen some changes that were driven by, the George Floyd murders. We've seen a lot of social justice giving come to the forefront. So are those temporary changes or are those long-term changes? Luckily, very smart people have been thinking about these things a lot more than 15 years. And there are reasons why foundations change their missions. So I found a study that was conducted by Sage Journals, and this is really recent. This was just published in 2019, but they looked at foundations that had been around for a long time. So they were actually looking at foundations. They looked at 442 family foundations founded earlier than 1992, and they looked at their giving all the way through 2019. So this was right before the pandemic, but this is what they found. They found that there are 4 primary reasons why foundations might change their missions or their guidelines. Regulatory changes was one of them. Generational shifts. This is not generational shifts of us, it's generational shifts of the trustees. So perhaps it was
the dynasts.
Yes, it is dynasty. Thank you. We're talking about dynasty changes. So maybe the matriarch or the patriarch set up the foundation. A couple generations later, you have a completely different set of family members who are actually running it, and they have very different priorities. That's going to precipitate a change. Professionalization. So when we talk about family foundations, especially when we're talking to organizations that are brand new to grants, we'll talk to them about what we consider to be corporate philanthropy, corporate foundations. Those are the foundations where there's really not a family member at all involved anymore. There is a professional staff that is running that foundation and making decisions about where those dollars give. That giving looks a lot different than foundations where family is still primarily involved and making decisions, because those giving decisions are linked a lot more to the initial giving preferences of the folks who founded the foundation. So professionalization also changes giving. The last one was societal changes. This one was really interesting because what the study found is that societal changes, this was either in response to societal changes, which I think we can say we saw a lot of over the past 2 years, or as a catalyst to bring about societal change. And I think we've seen some foundations really show an interest in becoming a catalyst as well. So, all right, poll. You can drop your answer in the comments and we'll have Kara jump on. Before I show you the results, I want to know, how many percent of foundations do you think change their mission over the life cycle of the foundation? Think about it, drop it into the comments. We'll give you 60 seconds to think about this one. Srivdya, Randy, do you have any guesses?
Oh goodness.
Randy, heart palpitations.
Yes. 70, 75. I'm gonna go high.
75%. Srivdya, what do you think? 100% change. Okay, cool.
Everybody has to change.
They should.
Nice. So I see 30%, 45%, 60%. Okay, so let's look at this. This is so fascinating. So of these 400 some odd organizations studied, 91 of them, or 20%, never changed. So that means 80% of these foundations.
I should have remembered my bell curve, right?
Between the two of us, we're like right in the middle.
Averaged out. And look at what these changes are. They're so interesting. So about 7% reduced the number of topics that they fund. 35% expanded, which is fascinating. About maybe 17% started funding mostly different topics than what they started with. 8% totally shifted, completely different topic than what they originally started with. And of course, there is some data that's missing. So we could probably actually call it closer to 70% because we don't know about this 12%. Somewhere between 70 and 80% of these private foundations changed their mission, which I'm not going to lie, was shocking to me because we tend to think of private foundations as these unmovable pillars, right? As completely married to what they fund, never going to change, something that you can just rely on come hell or high water. And what the data tells us is that is not true at all.
And that's scary for a nonprofit.
Yes,
because when you're
100%.
making your upcoming fiscal year budget and you put in your foundational giving, you have to give a guesstimate. And so usually what a lot of nonprofits will do is put their 75% to 100% like assurance, like we get this every year. They're always giving to us. It's always good. We have a good relationship. We put that in that bucket expecting it.
Right.
And so many, especially these smaller nonprofits, rely so heavily on one or two big funders.
Right.
That when that gets cut or completely cut out, then you're scrambling to find a way to keep the doors open and your people paid.
And I think we're living through a time of unprecedented societal change. And we've just learned that that is one of the 4 primary reasons why foundations change their mission. So this is something that I think this is a huge shift in donor motivation change, right? We're living through a time where we're going to expect live change happening in the foundation giving space. I think it's something that nonprofits need to be preparing for in their budgets. That they may be dealing with a certain percentage of their foundations that are going to change how they're giving. So let's talk about, before I jump into this, Randy, I wanted to touch base with you really quickly because I mentioned that we have experienced in the local Tulsa market this from some rather large foundations. Before I jump into kind of our quick list, do you have recommendations on how you have helped some of Ride-On's clients navigate what to do when a foundation either cuts their gift or completely changes their guidelines and they find out, guess what, you're not going to get anything from us anymore?
Well, that's really when, honestly, organizations and companies such as Ride-On become so handy, right? Because a lot of development directors or development departments are one-man shop. And so now not only are you dealing with the consequences of a funder dropping their funding amount or completely axing it all together, but now you're going to have to start doing the research in order to figure out where to compensate that funding. So when you have a third party that you can invest in that can put that time and dedication into looking for new sources, it's really a important and I would say precious thing to have available to you. So as if you are a department and you're looking at funding being cut, you're going to have to look at how you can diversify your funding, which I would suggest regardless of pandemic or not, because the more diversified funds that you have coming in, the different avenues, the more you're going to protect yourself in case of another pandemic or, I mean, knock on wood here.
All the wood.
All the wood. It's going to protect you from those unprecedented circumstances. I think we've learned, if anything, in the last 10 years, is that we're living in an era of unprecedented events. And so diversifying those funds and building those relationships with your funders so that you're aware where they're at and they're aware where, okay, I'm getting confused. Yes. They're aware where you're at and you are aware of where they are, right? So I would say really focusing on like a trust-based philanthropy, because trust is something that we need to work on, right? So having more flexible and long-term plans with them, if they do plan on shifting gears, if they want to go from one sector to another, having that conversation of how can we slowly bring us down so that we can find a compensation for that loss of income is really crucial in this time.
Do you know what the #1 result is on Google if you search for what to do when a foundation stops giving to a nonprofit? This is fun. The first search result is how to close down your nonprofit. Thank you, Google. That's very helpful.
Oh, wow.
Terrible. And I got to tell you, go ahead, Srivdya.
No, but that is so true, because I think, talking about technology and, how we were talking about, the single click buy, right? And if you're talking about that, then I think we really need to change how we apply and provide funding, because it's ridiculous. Oh, yes. It's totally ridiculous. Like, as a business owner who's doing nonprofit work, I find it ridiculous that I don't know where my income is coming from. Right. And I do have income coming. It's not as if I don't, I do have it, but I just don't know where it's coming and when it's going to come.
Right.
Because it's so impenetrable and, impossible to find out. So I think that technology piece, I think, is, like I was saying earlier, you can't fight it. It's there and it is useful, but I think we need to push more for that kind of equity in applying and getting it's like setting up a marketplace, literally. Here are all the people who are willing to give money, and here are all the people who want to get money and go, right? Literally.
Absolutely.
And there's so many ways that can be organized and made easier instead of making it this game of hazard.
Well, I have to tell you, I can't believe that I can't believe that there's not more information available on this, given how frequent we now know that changes actually are to guideline changes for foundations. So we're definitely going to be putting out a blog post or something so that we can get people this information. So Randy hit on some of these and they're really, really important. So I can't tell you how many of our clients get that letter from a nonprofit and they go, oh no, let's go change our budget and we're going to have to think some things, but they don't actually talk to the funder. And there are some things that you can do to help mitigate or to create a softer landing when this happens. So first of all, request a meeting, as Randy said, to get more information about what's happening. Hopefully you already have a relationship. Hopefully you're getting a phone call before you get the letter, right? On that meeting, explore if there are any other openings for your organization. They may be, the organization may be shifting to food scarcity, and they think that's something you don't focus on, but maybe you have a food pantry they just didn't know about associated with one of your programs. Clarify specifically why they feel that you're not a fit, and explore if there are other ways that you can potentially fit into what they want to fund now. That does not mean change your mission. We're not talking about mission creep. We are talking,
or try to add programming to somehow fit
no,
them that's not mission oriented to you.
Let's add to new programs. But chances are they don't know everything about you, even if they think they know a lot about you, and there may still be a way for you to partner with them. Also, try to negotiate a tier decrease. If you regularly get $25,000 and you've gotten a letter that this is your last year, talk to them about what that means financially for the organization. See if there's a way that they can step you down next year to 12.5, right? Rather than cutting you off and making you finding a brand new $25,000 grant somewhere, because they do understand how long it takes to find new funding. They're not new to this. But if you aren't making the case for your organization of how important it is or how difficult it will be to replace that funding, then they don't know. Ask which organizations might be receiving funding from them under the new guidelines, under the new granting structures, because there may actually be ways for you to partner with who they are going to fund. I heard a great example of this recently of someone who lost a grant, found out who won the grant, went to them to learn more about what was won, and then they realized that they could actually be a sub-grantee of that grant and partner with the organization that won. So even though they didn't win the grant, they actually still ended up getting revenue from the grant that they lost.
And funders love partnerships. Like
exactly.
if their dollar can go to 2 organizations, yeah,
absolutely,
that's a big selling point.
And then if none of this is working out, if it really is just a hard pivot and you are no longer a fit, thank them and start your prospect research, like Randy said, because it is you are going to have to replace that funding. So in short, how has donor motivation changed through the pandemic and beyond? When it comes to special events and foundations, pretty significantly. There have been some major changes in how donors, not in just how they want to give, but in what they're giving to and their expectation level, all kinds of different things. So we're not out of the woods yet, is the short end of the story. Flexibility and innovation are going to both continue to be of critical importance in both of these areas. So that nonprofits in the immediate future can continue to sustain and grow that fundraising piece. Randy, Srivdya, do you have anything else that you'd like to share? Any final thoughts you'd like to leave folks with before we jump off today?
I think the last thing I want to say in terms of local funders, if you are going for local funders, there's no excuse not to pick up a phone and actually talk to them in person. A letter of interest just going out once a year is not going to do it anymore. They have to feel invested. And then if you don't know that person, look up the trustees, go to their 990, look up their trustees, share it with your board. More times than not, you're going to maybe possibly find, 6 degrees of separation somewhere, and you're going to be able to find a way to connect with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy.
Yeah, my only last bit of advice is collaborate, because that's the only way. Nonprofit work is always underfunded, even on the donor side. So they will have only one program officer for, I don't know, 100 donors, right? I mean, like for 100 grants that they may be providing, right? I mean, so what I'm trying to say is, good luck trying to find time to talk to your donor and develop a relationship and go for a coffee. And yeah, it all sounds great, but it doesn't work out that way, unfortunately. But yes, I think collaborating, I mean, just think about it. If I were a donor, I would rather give one grant, process one grant, which covers 5 organizations, than have to deal with 5 different applications.
Right.
So the more you can find a way to collaborate with others, right? Not changing your mission at all, but to actually find those other organizations with whom you can work with and find ways to work with. I mean, we are 5 years old. Our organization is turning 5 this year. And I can tell you that some of the events that you're seeing that come out of our organization has taken more than 5 years to develop.
Absolutely.
It didn't just happen overnight. So it's not easy trying to learn about another organization and work with them and have trust with them.
Right.
And that's so important. You cannot work without trust, but building that trust takes a lot of time and willingness from the other side also. So if you are black,
It's
You
so
know, if you
important to engage those trustees, right? To your point, a program officer can't meet with 400 nonprofits in a year, but that board of trustees is there for a reason. And so
And
to
then
Randy's point of
utilize your
view,
board.
yeah,
Utilize your
money-
board. Make them do some work.
we tend to think of partnerships as nonprofit to nonprofit, but think of partnerships larger than that. Trustee to board member to program officer to nonprofit staffer. How many of those connections can you make? Well, thank you all so much for your time today. Randy and Srivdya, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an awesome panel. I hope you'll all join us in March as well. We're going to take a deep dive into capital campaigns, which will be a lot of fun. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Kara will be sending out the slides, and we'll be posting the video as well. Have a great day. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.